internet. I hope you've not masturbated today. We need you sharp and ready to go. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And you don't have to be Will Smith white. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Sorry to Bother You.
I'm sorry to bother you, but we missed this one last week because of my seat anarchy, but we're picking it back up this week.
We're picking it back up. Seat anarchy is no longer reigning supreme. You know what is reigning supreme, Shahir?
It's raining men?
We have...
The Supremes?
No, well, I mean, if you can figure out a way to tie it back once I give her introduction. Dear friends and listeners, it is with a great pleasure that I get to introduce you fresh off the plane from sunny California, the supervising producer of Steve, The Steve Harvey Show, one of my original MTV internship classmates, and with this very show being her 7th appearance.
Is it the 7th appearance?
On our program. Ladies and gentlemen, she is the title holder for most guest spots on the only podcast about movies, Miss Jessica Tucker.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Going to clap. Shahir's not. There we go. That was a prompt.
I'll clap for myself.
Yay.
I missed you guys.
Well-
Welcome
you too.
home.
Thank you. It's so good to be back.
Are you just dropping by for a week just for this podcast? You just flew in?
I flew in just for this.
That's
Nice.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sorry to bother
Are we
you.
covering the ticket? Are we covering the tickets? Just so I know.
You are.
Okay.
Surprise.
Oh, boom. There you go.
Sorry to bother you, Shahir. You bought Jess's plane ticket.
How you've been? So you have been on the podcast 7 times. I would say, venture to guess that you would be on the podcast a whole lot more if you were actually living in New York City right now. But you've moved to LA.
Yeah.
How's it been?
It's been good. It's been a full year actually this week.
Yeah.
I'm still not used to it.
Right.
LA is very different than New York City, but I'm getting there.
You know, one thing because I used to live in LA, one thing I remember about living in LA is like going to the movies and hanging out at the movies was like a way bigger deal in LA than it is in New York. Like, because you would go to the mall, you'd hang out at the mall all day, and then you go to the movies in the afternoon kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you find that there or?
Yeah, it's definitely different. You know what I was thinking about today is I went and saw this movie by myself.
Right.
And I
Good
used,
for you.
Yeah, and I used to always go and see movies alone here in New York, and
Yep.
it never felt weird.
Yeah.
And what I've been confronted with in LA is like it's a very different experience doing things on your own in LA.
Yeah.
Because other people aren't alone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it feels awkward. And so it was really like nice and refreshing today to like go and sit in a theater alone and do this.
There's something about New York City that, and I think it has to do with not driving.
Yeah.
Because you, in order to go anywhere else to go to a movie, you actually have to get in your car alone, go park the car alone, then go to the theater. Where here you're kind of walking, and there's a movie theater every 15 minutes, and you're like, oh, well, I could do this right now. So it's a nice comfort that I don't think a lot of people off of public transit get to actually experience.
Yeah, and then in LA, and like I've noticed this in like the suburbs too. It's like you're saying, it's like you go shopping, and it's like kind of like a nice thing to do to rest your feet.
Just to go
Yep.
to the movies,
Take a break,
I think
yeah.
the term air conditioner break comes from like going to the movies in LA. You know, you take an
Yeah.
air conditioner break for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
You know, one way to freak people out in LA, and I've done this a couple of times, is walk to the place you're going to meet them, and like especially if it's in another neighborhood. Like it takes like half an hour to walk from one neighborhood to the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
But nobody does that. And
Yeah.
I did it, and everyone I was meeting freaked out because they were like, you walked? Like, what happened on the way? And they were like asking questions about the
Yeah.
route I took. And I was like, no, I just, and it was literally a
just
straight
did.
line. Yeah.
Yeah. And people told me that whenever I first got there. And when I first got there, I didn't have a place to live or a car. I had to
Right.
figure that out in 2 weeks before my job started.
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, no one walks in LA. And I was like, yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so like, I started walking, and then I came across a street mountain, and I was like, oh, it's not flat here. Like,
Right,
this,
yeah.
this is also maybe why people don't walk as
Yeah.
much, is because like you get like you're looking at a 45-degree angle sometimes.
Well, regardless, it's great to have you back. I'm curious, in the year you've been away and we haven't seen you in a while, like what have you been watching? What have you been like keeping up with, other than, the work that you do, obviously?
Yeah, so I took a kind of like a break. I got really wrapped up in work, and I didn't really see very many movies or watch much TV.
Oh my God.
You didn't have us breathing down your neck there anymore.
Or maybe you're living like a real human being and like reading books and like taking hikes and like
and not consistently judging other people's work on a weekly basis, then it broadcasts that to a bunch of people across the internet. That I mean, your life seems a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been outside a lot. Like being in LA, like I've definitely been like going on hikes, sitting by the pool, reading a book.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I did recently binge watch Atlanta.
Yeah.
Nice.
And really enjoyed that. Which Lakeith, who's in
Lakeith
this movie.
Stanfield,
Yeah. What else have I watched? I watched Handmaid's Tale.
Right. Yeah.
That was very
I'm
good.
reading the book for that right now.
Yeah. You know what's so funny is a couple years ago, someone handed I was in jury duty.
Yeah.
And an older lady handed me that book. And she was like, "We're reading this in my book club, and like it's like really provocative. Like you should read it." And I was like, "This is so."
And did she only hand it to you? Like, was it just like, "Oh,
Wow,
you're a young
you were the
woman.
chosen one."
You're a young woman. I think you'll enjoy this."
Yeah, and then I didn't read it, and then now I regret it because it became like such a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed this show. It's super, super dark,
It's
but
dark,
like you
yeah.
can't stop watching it.
I actually haven't watched the show. I've just like my wife's been watching it, and so I've kind of like seen snippets of it, and then I'm reading the book, which is very different to the show, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. As far as I can tell, the show basically covers all the ground of the book in like the first couple of episodes, and then from
Yes.
there on, it's on its own.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
So yeah.
And then let me ask you this, Jess, before we start moving on to Sorry to Bother You. On a scale of 10 to 25,000, how excited are you for the new Fantastic Beasts?
Ooh.
I feel like you just heard that name for the first time in a year. Just-
Yeah.
Very excited.
No, you don't have to be. I don't know how
12.
I am. Yeah, it could be a 12. No,
that one may need to like build from here.
Yeah. No, because you were on our Fantastic Beasts 1 podcast. And I remember I enjoyed that film, but I also wasn't super pumped. I don't think any of us really were.
I'm pretty sure I forgot about it entirely at this point.
I forgot they were making more, yeah.
Other than Johnny Depp appeared, and that was and that was about.
And now he's the bad guy.
Yeah, and that's about all I remember.
Oh, well.
All right, before we jump into Sorry to Bother You, we have a nice new internet review that I kind of wanted to just shout out to. That was Stephen, who is my friend from New Zealand. So this is kind of a cheat review because I know the guy. But Stephen's review, just thank you very much for writing this. And his comments were, if you know the burning emptiness of seeing a movie by yourself, Jess, he's looking at you at this one, and not being able to sit around afterward with friends arguing over the film, then this is the podcast that could fill that gap. Shahir Dowd and Matthew Kroll are the perfect guys, agree to disagree, to see a movie with and argue endlessly, definitely agree, and entertainingly about. Information and opinions flow freely. You won't always agree with them, agreed, but you will find your enjoyment of the movies deeply enriched. It is the only podcast about movies.
Thanks, Steve.
You too can write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod with your thoughts, feelings, emotions, emojis. What else could you send us? GIFs.
I love GIFs. Send me GIFs.
Just send us random GIFs, like and make us do the work to figure out what the context of what you're asking us.
I will talk through what GIF you send us. I'll be like, Samantha, whatever, sent us blah blah blah, but I'll talk through the GIF and then we'll have to guess which GIF it was.
But I'd like it to be kind of like a mystery puzzle. Like for example, send us a GIF of like TV show Power Rangers mixed with a shot from The Matrix mixed with...
Oh, you want one of those word puzzles?
Yeah, and then I've got to figure out what it is you're trying to tell me.
Hey, send us all those things. Onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. A GIF is the gift that keeps on gifting.
Yeah, I got a really interesting one the other day that like had really nothing to do with anything we're texting about, but like at the same time made perfect sense. And it was a hummingbird hitting the head of an owl, and the owl like looked like very shocked.
Was that like an idea forming, or was it like you're hurting my brain?
It was kind of like an oops type moment, and I was like, okay, I'll take it. Accepted.
My favorite GIF is Michael Fassbender from, I believe, Alien Covenant.
Okay.
Where it's like, show me you, and then he goes, no, the real you. No, the real you. And then the last thing he goes, perfection. So there's a beautiful GIF of him just saying perfection, and in beautiful typography, it like rotates in from itself, and it just says perfection. So if that's like my plans are set, we're going to actually go to this movie or do whatever, 7 o'clock, is that what you said? perfection. Like, that's my ultimate favorite movie gift to send.
I am definitely an abuser of the GIF format. I'm like, I send GIFs for everything when not required, and I feel like sending GIFs was like something you did in 2010, and I'm just catching up to it now.
It's definitely how you end a conversation. One way or another, either they'll laugh and enjoy it, or they'll be like, ugh. But either way, they'll know it's over.
Yeah.
So we are moving on to Boots Riley's film, Sorry to Bother You, which is, again, we were supposed to review this last week, but I was happy that we managed to get in Leave No Trace.
Yes.
Because I messed up my seating arrangements at the movies, and we're playing catch up on that, which hopefully doesn't push out our review of Eighth Grade a little bit, but we might have to do a little bit of reshuffling.
We'll figure it out. We'll shuffle the deck. We'll shuffle all the decks.
Matt, can you tell us what Sorry to Bother You is about?
I sure can. IMDb describes this film as: in an alternative present-day version of Oakland, telemarketer Cassius Green discovers a magical key to professional success, propelling him into a macabre universe.
It's an interesting thing is if you look up in the Wikipedia for this film as well, it listed as a science fiction movie, and I was curious what you guys just initially, before we even start the review, think about that.
That's fine.
Matt, seal of approval. Boom.
Yeah, I mean it.
Two thumbs up.
It goes. It doesn't have to have needed to go into that genre, but it does. Minor spoiler, and then that's what it is.
Okay.
You can't like dip your. You can't have the last act of a film become science fiction and not have it be science fiction, because science fiction is sort of like that weird sort of build. And the second you start like putting your claws into a trope, you're there.
So, like, say if Sleepless in Seattle was like Sleepless in Seattle, but at the very end, when they're on the top of the Empire State Building, it flies off into space. Would that now be a science fiction movie?
No, that'd be like a weird stinger. Like, I think it's if a third of your movie deals with the science fiction tropes, you're a science fiction movie.
All right.
Yeah, I did a light Google before I watched it and saw science fiction, and then it was like halfway through, I was like, I don't think this is science fiction, and then by the end I was like, minor spoiler, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll accept.
All right. One thing I remember about Jess being on the podcast that I absolutely loved as well is she always turns up with like an entire notepad fill. Well, I'm looking at this notebook, and I'm presuming it's entirely filled.
Tell him the story
in the most beautiful handwriting, by the way.
I already know the story. I know the story, but tell Shahir the story of your notepad.
The story of the notepad is that I didn't come to New York City with a notepad.
Oh my God! Did we buy that for you as well?
Yes. Yeah, look under your laptop.
God,
there's
expenses
a receipt.
for this podcast are really going up.
No, I went and saw it, and then I immediately like met my friend after, and so before he got there, I was like texting him. I was like writing notes in my phone, and I don't like that. I like the tangible notes. Trying to like just like spew out everything I could think of before he got there, and then as soon as that lunch was over, I like ran to Duane Reade and grabbed a notebook. I was like, I need to like, that's because I'm a visual processor, and so it's also how like I understand things too. Is like that's like me sorting it out.
Well, I hope you kept your receipt.
I definitely did.
Yeah, it's going to be delivered to us.
$1.59.
Yeah.
Okay,
we are high rollers here at the Only Movie Podcast.
Well, shall we, in the spirit of hospitality, shall you go first with your first opinions on this movie?
Okay. Here are my first opinions. I think the first thing that I asked Matt was whenever he brought this up to me just last night, because this was all very sudden.
It was all very sudden. We went out to dinner because she was in town, and then I was like, oh, well, Shahir doesn't know which day he can do yet, and Jess is like, well, I can do Thursday. We're recording this on Thursday. And
I was like, tomorrow?
Yeah, and then we're like, so this all came together very quickly, hence no notebook and all that jazz.
Yeah, and so I think what I asked you was like, I the only familiarity I had with this was I worked the MTV Movie Awards red carpet, and Lakeith and Tessa Thompson walked the carpet, and so that was the only knowledge of this film that I had, but I hadn't really heard anything else about it. And when I asked you, was like, is this an indie film?
Right.
And you were like, yes. And so then I thought all day about it after I'd seen it, is would I consider this an indie film? And then yes, because then also it leaned into the question of like what constitutes an indie film versus like a mainstream film. Right. And I actually, my favorite like philosopher in the world just did a talk on this. Like I just like heard it like last week, and it's the idea that a mainstream pop film is all about idealization and like fantasy, and an indie film is all about sublimation, which is like the Freudian concept of like how you process like the intertwining of beauty and ugly. Okay. So it's like how you're happy with something even though it's not perfect.
Right. So
Sure.
accepting the reality that you have
Yes.
versus fantasizing about the reality you aspire to.
Yes.
But to be fair, I will say I do that exercise with big popcorn movies all the time to still enjoy them, because I know there's some ugly bits in there too, and I'm like, well, no, but I like that philosophy.
Yeah, and so when I looked at it by that definition, I felt like I was like, oh, this is like very like textbook like indie movie, and so I want to talk to, and I'll like kind of hold off because this is just first impressions.
Yeah.
But I appreciated what it did as a platform, like as art. I respected that it had like all of these little messages and very like nuanced things, but at the same time, like I'm not necessarily someone that like loves an indie movie because I'm very sensitive and it makes me uncomfortable. And I kind of like when I see something like this, like I feel it for like a few days and it like stays with me.
Okay.
And so I liked it because I understood what it was trying to do, but at the same time, like I probably wouldn't see it again because I'm not someone that like super loves that kind of like being confronted with like that kind of like suffering and stuff.
Okay. What was the kind of suffering that just with spoilers, without any spoilers, like what did it bring up in you that made you uncomfortable?
Okay, so I think the first thing like right off the bat is he like clearly is like a character that is in an existential like identity crisis.
Yeah.
He like right from the very beginning. And that like does that thing of like it makes you then immediately start like reflecting on yourself. There's also all kinds of like social and economic like things that it makes you look at, and like how you like how he was dealing with like not having money, but he just so badly wanted success and he just wanted a job and like all that kind of stuff. Like it brings up all that kind of stuff. It's very, very relatable. Like it's all that kind of stuff that like you deal with. And then he had to deal with this is not super spoilery, but like then whenever he did get a little success, like how you orient yourself with your like old friends whenever you start having something that you didn't have that they're trying to have. And then all like there's like the social aspect when it gets like super weird and sci-fi at the end too.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you, Shahir?
So I guess just coming back to that sort of seat anarchy problem that I had.
Oh no!
For listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, in the previous episode, I told a long story about how I went to see this movie, but had my seating arrangements messed up. I was sold the wheelchair seat, which is not actually a seat, and then was trying to find a seat. Jumping around the theater, it was a full theater, so I couldn't get a seat, and I ended up seeing it just this week in an almost empty theater.
Yeah.
And I will say this, I feel like I had I feel like this is a movie to see with a big crowd. And this is a movie that I feel like as I watched it, I was like, oh, I kind of wish I was in with a large crowd watching this to kind of experience the reactions that people would have to certain moments in this movie. So there was that initially, because I will say, just up front, if it, I think primarily it's being sold as a comedy. I didn't laugh a hell of a lot. There were I was definitely engaged and interested in what was happening, but I can't say that I was tickled, by the actual comedy that was happening. The other thing that I was thinking about a lot as I watched this film, and there's a really great article written by Beandra July for The Hollywood Reporter about this movie, and the article is called Boots Riley Makes Needed Room for Black Weirdness. And I was thinking a lot about me as a consumer of films and a critic of films, and one of the things that I remember as a film student was like trying to have like sort of a set paradigm for how I think and view films, that is consistent, so that I can, when I'm looking at a film, I have a sort of way of thinking about it that works for me. And I remember when I was younger, there was a film that I saw by a French filmmaker by the name of Olivier Assayas, and the film was called Demon Lover. And it was the first time in a long time where I saw a film where I was like, my paradigm for thinking about this film doesn't match what the film is actually doing. And I have to change the way I'm thinking in order to read the film correctly, because the things that I'm looking for are not what the film is interested in. And that was an experience that I kind of felt for the first time in a long time watching this movie, which was that my paradigm for what I'm looking for, in a way, doesn't quite match what this film is actually doing.
Yeah.
And once I kind of reconciled that there was this sort of initial feeling of, oh, I'm not necessarily engaging with this film, but I am interested in what it's doing and I am liking what it's doing, then I started to come around to a little bit more. And it's a post sort of reconciliation that happens. I will still say, from my sort of paradigm, my initial paradigm of thinking, I did enjoy the film. I enjoyed the boldness of the film. I enjoyed the oddity of it all. Again, that Beander July article about Black weirdness, I think, is really on point about the necessity. And I think, something like a show like Atlanta kind of points to as well, where there isn't a lot of shows about the African American experience that isn't that doesn't necessarily have to be grounded in sort of like the dire reality that we live in. So I really enjoyed that. But I found, I guess, if we're looking at it as a social satire, I found that the satire was pointing at a lot of different things. There was kind of a lot of different ideas. It's almost bursting at the seams with different ideas about different concepts, to deal with race, capitalism, employment. Slavery comes up a lot in this movie.
Unionizing.
Unionizing, friendships, and even to the point of... No, I'm not going to say what that is because that is a spoiler.
Yeah.
And I will... I generally found that I wish that the satire in this film was more pointed. So in that it served more of a singular story that had a real clear definition of what it was trying to say. I think this film does say a lot and it has a lot on its mind. And all of those things are very interesting. I just found personally that the story, that as a singular experience, it didn't quite all connect into something that I like. But like when I saw Demon Lover, which is a film that doesn't conform to that kind of necessarily like pointed thinking because that's what the film is about. I actually did, there was something about this film where I found that desire for a single narrative experience wasn't necessarily as important. Maybe I'll sum that up by saying this. This film starts off fairly normal and then gets weirder and weirder and weirder the more it gets on. I really love the weird stuff. I thought the weird stuff that I'm, again, avoiding for the sake of spoiler, the surrealism, the magical realism, I found all that stuff delightful and wonderful and really well considered. But I found it took a long time to get there. And until we got there, I was kind of, ho-hum about Lakeith Stanfield's existential crisis. Like the sort of unionizing thing, the way in which employment and jobs kind of dehumanize people and stuff. It's there. It's interesting. I would say it was kind of like the way I would describe it is kind of Office Space meets South Park. Somewhere, that's kind of where I sort of saw the film, and I love the South Park stuff. So that was kind of my overall experience. I think there's a lot to dive into and a lot to talk about in spoilers.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. It's like I'm biting my tongue because it reframed itself a lot. It's like every so often it would shift and it would change how you. It's like, oh, this movie is. It's not this kind of movie, it's this kind of movie.
Yeah,
and then it did that a couple of times.
Yeah.
I only saw it do that once.
Okay.
And we'll get into sort of what that is. I'll real quick because I know we're going over my first impressions are I dug the shit out of this, even though I have a bunch of problems with it. But I'll always side with the film that tries something interesting and cool over a film that just plays it safe and is super boring. I would describe this as Scott Pilgrim with a shotgun. Scott Pilgrim, it has the sort of manicness that Scott Pilgrim had, and the sort of but with Scott Pilgrim, it was dealing with one specific issue, and that was Scott's psyche and dealing with how he handles actually relationships and falling in love and what he even thinks love actually is and what he puts value on. This, like you said, Shahir, and the reason I use the analogy of a shotgun is because there is no one point here. This is a shotgun blast of reasoning, of causes, of ideologies, and it's cramming as much as there is humanly possible as it can into its runtime. I think it helps with its sort of manic, overwhelming the senses at certain points, feeling it wants to give you, but it definitely doesn't have the precision to actually hit more than maybe one or two of its points it's trying to get across home.
Yeah.
And I think it's this is his feature. This is Boots' feature film debut, correct? Because
Yes.
I was looking about IMDb, and I think the last one of the things I noticed is he had 2 tracks on the Superbad soundtrack.
He's a very established musician.
Yeah.
Really, very prolific in the hip hop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as making cinema, this is his first thing, and for this to be his first movie is nuts.
Yeah.
Like in a good, great way.
Yeah.
I do want to see this film again because I do feel like the third act, where it dips into sci-fi, and we'll get into it in spoilers, did retch me away from. It's funny, you were into that, Shahir. You were into that sort of stuff. I was way more into, because the first 2/3 is what I would call sort of a building magical realism sense to it. And then it goes straight on fantasy, like sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah.
And when it did the twist into that, I felt like it was this. I hope this doesn't come off as pedantic, but like it felt like that's someone constructed this who hadn't constructed a lot of stories this complex on such a scale before. It felt like they wanted to get all the ideas in as quickly as possible, and then they had so many ideas that the movie moved along a little faster than they wanted the actual ideas to come, and then by the time they got to a point, maybe in either editing or filmmaking or whatever, they're like, oh shit, and then like had to get to the next thing, which changes the whole game. It felt a little disjointed as far as structure is concerned. Now, again, I don't particularly care because it was a super fun ride overall, but I was more on board with the first 2/3 of the film than the last third.
So I think we should call it at this point and say we are officially going to talk about spoilers. And there is, if you haven't seen the film at this point, there is a particular spoiler that we're going to go into that you should absolutely not know about walking into this movie.
Yeah, because I had no clue.
And I went and watched the trailers after the movie. This is a movie I really wanted to see, so I avoided all the trailers.
Yep.
And this is a spoiler that is not hinted at in the trailers at all.
Kudos to the marketing department for having some fucking restraint and making a special movie-going experience.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just really wonderful. So spoilers from this moment forward. And I think we're going to be talking about some horses.
Yeah. Equine sapiens?
Equine sapiens.
Equisapiens.
What does that play? Equus?
Sure.
Oh, and Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe did it in New York. Yeah, we're going to be talking about some horsecocks. But
I mean, we don't have to just talk about we could talk about what they represent.
Oh, that's all I focus on. You know, when I said I love the thing, that's what
it all makes sense.
It all makes sense now. No, there's a couple of things there. In terms of the film, this is that sort of thing about paradigms that I was thinking about, because another film like this that I thought about was Donnie Darko, which is a first-time film that has a lot of ideas in it, and when I watched Donnie Darko, I remember I watched it back to back with Mulholland Drive, and as I watched Donnie Darko, I kind of went. The thinking I had was, I kind of wish an older filmmaker had made this film because they would streamline it a little more. But the other half of me was going, but I kind of dig the rock and roll, the kind of punk aesthetic of a young filmmaker kind of jumping in and giving a jolt to something. And I was like, and I think the older filmmaker paradigm would be like, kind of giving me what I expected, and in sort of a cleaner way. And so that thing about Boots Riley, kind of, it's his first film, and streamlining it, I kind of dig that it's his first film, and I kind of dig the sort of weirdness and strange direction of it all, and the change in tones and the oddity. I think, like you, as an experience, I was kind of a little bit taken away from the film in terms of seeing it as a singular experience. But I dug it. I dug that side of it. So it's a very sort of like middle of the road kind of assessment. But I did really enjoy his visual sense, his timing, his sense of story. You know, there's a moment in the middle of the film where they have kind of like a Yo Mama battle with Jermaine Fowler and Lakeith Stanfield.
Jermaine Fowler.
But it's like a Yo Mama is the best kind of compliment.
It was a compliment.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is the sort of odd, humorous thing that could only come from this filmmaker in this particular film, and that's what I love about it.
That was really refreshing.
Yeah, and it was kind of it's not hinted at.
Yeah.
You know, like there's no setup for it, there's no payoff for it, but I loved it.
A real quick aside about Jermaine Fowler, because I love that man. We worked with him on the Code shows, both Jess and I did, and he's a phenomenal dude. I'm so happy that Superior Donuts was going on his show, and then also now this. I wanted more from him, because I know how fucking funny he is, and I was like waiting for the first time you see him in the film is when the main character's interviewing for the telemarketing job, and there's this is like it's very Scott Pilgrim for like the first 15 minutes, and then it just stops not trying to be, but just it goes in its own total thing. But there's this moment where it pans over when it references that Jermaine Fowler's character already did the same thing, or like they called or whatever, and it's just him in the window real quick after a whip pan, and he like goes back smiling, and I was like, there's fucking Jermaine. I was like, I didn't even realize he was in the film.
Right.
And so I was super pumped. Jermaine, buddy, we still have to play Mortal Kombat. It's been like a year at this point. The challenge is still on the table. So yeah, I really wanted more. I wanted to see him more, but especially the nice Yo Mama stuff was a delight. Anyway, sorry, I derailed just because I whenever Code Fam's in any of these movies, I'm fucking pumped for them.
Yeah, he was in it a lot too.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed him, and I enjoyed it, and that's the other thing, just sort of on a real surface level. This film's got one hell of a cast.
Yeah,
a lot of people, a lot of voices that you might recognize.
Yeah,
a lot of like cameos from people, like W. Camus Bell, like just drops in. He's like there for one scene. I loved what I got the sense of, and I actually have to shout out my friend Bogdan.
Bogdan!
Yeah, he was a great dude. I had lunch with him today. He went to a talk with Boots Riley about this film, and Bogdan was kind enough to kind of like fill me in on the details of how this film got made secondhand from Boots Riley.
That conversation between those two men, I would die to hear.
Between
Bogdan and Boots Riley, because just knowing Bogdan's personality and assuming Boots' his personality, I could stay there all day.
Yeah, no, I love chatting with Bogdan, but he kind of filled me in on the backstory of like how Boots wrote this film in 2012, wanted to make it originally for like $50,000 or something like that with some friends, because it's such an odd kind of thing. Couldn't get it made, couldn't get anyone to read it, and then passed it on to Dave Eggers. Now, if you remember from our Leave No Trace review, Dave Eggers was the guy who wrote the op-ed about the lack of culture in the White House. And he's also the editor of McSweeney's, very talented writer. And he sort of Boots Riley bumped into Dave Eggers and said, hey, would you read this? And for some reason, out of all the people who took the script and didn't read it, Dave Eggers, took the script and read it and said, I love this. I want to publish it because I know you're trying to get it made, but we're not, necessarily, I have no connections in that. Well, actually, he does, but he published it in McSweeney's, and they actually published a book version of the screenplay. And lots of people read the screenplay and thought it was amazing. It appeared on like the blacklist a number of times. And then Boots went out and wrote the album to go with it. And so it kind of had this like odd construction, and I think Forrest Whitaker came on a little bit later on.
He was he was a producer on it.
Yeah, and also the voice of one of our equine heroes.
Oh yeah.
And so this film has had this like long, tumultuous path to getting made, but I feel like kind of like when we talked about Hereditary, it felt like a film that had the on-the-ground support from everyone around it to allow it to dip into the weirdness that it was going to go into.
Yeah.
So I kind of, as much as I, had that thing about, its lack of pointedness, I kind of dug it for that as well. I don't know how you guys felt about that.
Yeah. I wrote down because I was looking at another article about Buzzarelli and like his process with like getting this picked up, and he had the same 23 word pitch that he used over and over and over, and it's an absurdist dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction inspired by the world of telemarketing. And I could tell like I like consume philosophy like in high volume, and then I like sort of like fumble around one of them and I try to like regurgitate it back because I'm like I love like just like learning about that kind of stuff, and I could tell like he's like definitely like very philosophical and like a lot of the language in that interview, and then this idea of the absurd is was interesting because I thought that the girlfriend, so the absurd is like whenever it's kind of like I was talking about with like sublimation, is like whenever you kind of like lean into like the muckiness of things and sort of like embrace the ride, like embracing the journey rather than the destination, like that kind of thing. And I thought that what Tessa Thompson's character, the girlfriend, represented Detroit was sort of like that rebel heart. Yeah. Like she was just like very, very content in like not having what she wanted.
She was the anarchist of the pair, right? Like he was much more of a conformist. As soon as he got paid, he was quite content. Whereas she found that kind of troubling, you know, ethically and existentially. Yeah. So there's that scene, that wonderful scene where she gives her performance, you know, with sheep's blood in balloons and cell phones being thrown at her, and I think there's a lot of layers to that scene. Yeah. Because, you know, like when she's been complaining about his white voice, for example, and then when we walk into that scene, she actually has this sort of British affectation that she's using as an artist. So there's a contradiction, but then she is really fully embraced in like the non-capitalist, non-consumerist version of art that she produces.
And that's why it's not conflicting, I feel like. That's why she's using the same tools he's using, but in her mind, she's using it for something for good that doesn't hurt anybody except for her. Yeah. And then in her mind, what he's doing is using the same type of affectations to do better himself, but hurt other people.
Yeah, I would also venture to guess that as a character, I think she would find there to be something comic about the fact that she's using a British affectation. Like, I don't think she would hide it. Like, I don't think she would actually... I think it's part of her performance.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. They're using the same tool, but using it for an opposite way and an opposite effect.
And did you catch that even before she got on stage, when she was talking to people, that she was using it before then too? Yeah, so she was definitely using it as like a tool. Yeah. Before, it's like it's almost as if her performance started whenever that event began, rather than she got on stage.
Because that's the only time you see it, right? That's the only time in the film that you see her doing that. I love that kind of aspect of it. Like, what else spoke to you in the film, even if it was difficult to watch or difficult to kind of...
Yeah, so, because it's a dark comedy, you know, the difference I wrote in my notes is, like, the difference between a comedy and, like, a tragedy or, like, a drama is, like, the main character doesn't know that they're being an idiot. And, like, that's kind of what's funny about it, is, like, they don't acknowledge the knowledge that they have. Like, he's... You see him processing, like you see him adapting white voice, and he like clearly thinks it's like in the beginning he's just like, that's stupid, but he doesn't acknowledge it, and then he goes with it, and he has like, I say idiot, but in not like the traditional way, because like there is like, you can tell that he knows, but he kind of like follows suit, like he gets teed up to something that you know that's not going to work out well for him. Yeah. And he still does it. And you know, in a tragedy and a drama, the character has a reversal. Yeah. And then like I'm not super familiar with The Office, but I've heard that the arc of The Office is that he's sort of, I read it here, like he's sort of, he's constantly humiliated. Yeah. He knows that he's an idiot, but doesn't acknowledge it.
Is this Michael Scott?
Yeah.
Yes.
The American show, yeah.
And then when he comes to acknowledge it, in that acknowledgement, he becomes a character you can admire and respect. And I think I know with the British version, like it kind of ends. Like once he acknowledges that he's an idiot, it kind of ends. Yeah. And this happens in this movie. He does something that you know is going to be disaster. And he goes into this upper echelon of the telemarketing world, and you're just like, this isn't going to be good. And like he, you know, and he's confronted with, you know, it's like not the world that he thought that it was going to be at all. And it's clearly like ridiculous, but he still does it. He still does it. And at the very end, I think it's whenever he's sitting there with Armie Hammer when he's telling him about his plan to have him be the
Malcolm,
the
Martin Luther King of
the horse people.
Yeah.
That's whenever he is just like, this is absurd.
Yeah.
And then that's the moment where I think you get that shift where it's like he's acknowledged that was his breaking point.
Yeah.
And then he becomes more heroic because then he starts trying to do the right thing and someone you admire.
And he instigates the resistance, so to speak, on this.
Yeah.
So there was something interesting that I liked something that was going on, especially in the big chaotic third act, that I didn't particularly love as much as the first two acts. But what I did love about it was, and again, I'm going to spoil the end of the movie right now, just in case.
Yeah.
If they're warning you. At the end of the film, when everything sort of goes back and he's, whatever, they've toppled the thing and they get their union or whatever, and he closes his garage door to go home with Tessa Thompson. He closes it and he hits his nose and he starts to become one of the horse people. And now it's interesting, and then that's the end of the film until like a very quick mid-credits scene. Now, I was like, when that happened and it went to credits, I was like, he signed the papers.
Right.
Like, I thought he went forward with the plan of bastard Armie Hammer going on. And I was like, holy shit, because that's how it would all play out. That's how he'd want it to play out. Go work with these people, have a moment of like unity so you gain their trust, then become one, then you're going to destroy it. I was like, this is like some weird, this is a master evil plan. But then I bet you they thought that might be what people thought would be going on with just that ending. So they tack on the other thing of him attacking Armie Hammer in his house. So for a fact that he is not actually with him.
But it could, it's also the case that ultimately he kind of does become the Martin Luther King of the horse people, I guess, maybe in that sense. He's the leader in some way. It's just that the plan backfires on Armie Hammer. I think that's an interesting reading of it as well. I think that's a really interesting way to read the film. I think the thing that you're talking about, Jess, is this sort of journey from conformist to anarchist. Like the sense of like, I want to live within the society as the rules pertain to me, but realizing slowly that doing that requires the loss of autonomy and the loss of identity, which is embodied by white voice. Like the loss of like, who am I and what is my voice in this society? And he slowly has to lose that more and more. Like when he becomes a power caller, the first thing that he's told is there's only white voice up here. So there's not even we don't just put it on for the calls. When you're in this space, you are always in white voice.
You have to be voiced by Patton Oswalt and David Cross.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is actually really fascinating. I think to me that's when the wheels start turning for him, and slowly the film becomes like a journey into realizing that anarchy is a more appropriate response when the system doesn't work for you.
Yeah. He like is in pursuit of identity, and then has like this like very like fast tracked like kind of like adolescent period of just like be this person, and then he starts putting those masks on, and then it's just like this doesn't work, and then he kind of does what you see Tessa Thompson's character do, and then he kind of like leans into this can be okay just being like messed up,
right? And it's what I love as well is that his version of I don't think he sees it as performance art, but the film kind of mirrors these two actions as her performance art, with him going on the television show to kind of show this video, and he gets abused, beaten up, and then like dunked in shit, and then like presents this video, which ultimately, like her performance piece, doesn't really change anything.
Yeah,
like there's some people are kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting, which I think is another sort of pointed commentary that this film has
of the day and age that we live in. I mean, even from the beginning of this film, something I really loved about it, I think it's a reason why I liked the first 2/3 more, is the world building is front and center. And well, maybe not front and center might be the wrong word. The world building is present from the first 5 minutes. You see billboards for the slavery company,
worry free,
where you get to just go and get a garbage wage, and they put you in bunk bed housing, and they feed you, and then you don't have to.
So pretty
worry
much the way we all live and work right now, right?
I mean, I mean,
Pretty much living in New York City.
sure.
Middle class living in New York
Except
City.
it's a little bit more. Actually, I'd say it's a lot a bit more worse.
I'm being ironic.
Okay, but and then you see the billboards. Then you see the one of the dropped. There's 2 or 3 dropped plot points because again, this movie is chocked to the brim of just stuff.
Yeah.
Of the revolutionaries or the people that are sort of like quietly fighting back.
Yeah.
The Left Eyes. You stop seeing references to Left Eyes and who are Left Eyes, but then you think Tessa Thompson's character is a Left Eye, and that she is, but then it doesn't really matter because then she goes with the people who want to unionize. Then that sort of like anarchist thing kind of goes a little bit away.
Yeah, the Left Eye thing fizzles out.
Yeah.
But
Unless
like
they're part of the final.
but they're not.
I mean, they might be.
I mean, sure, but they don't like. There's a lot of things that this movie gives time to, with dialogue and references and things that then it just because there's so much else going on that it deems more important, it pushes aside. Another thing, unless someone could give me a read on this and maybe sort of fix my crossed wires. The love triangle, quote unquote, between Tessa Thompson, main character, and
Stephen Yeun.
Stephen Yeun. It like moves to a point and then it just doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to amount to
because the movie
much.
realizes that it doesn't care about it. Like the movie, that's and maybe that's a strength. The movie goes through its own thing and tries a bunch of stuff, and then it's like, ooh yeah, I like option 6, and then it like goes that direction. Then it, like you've reached 9 more doors, and it's like, well, I'm gonna go through the fucking tangerine one, and then it goes through that. Like it's definitely a splintery sort of tree narrative as opposed to like. I don't know if when this was written, it feels like no, I'm sorry, not chronologically. I mean when during the act of writing it, I don't know if it actually like the author knew the end. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it feels like something where it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's spiral.
Yeah, I think they were trying to do the thing of going to like my very like now that I'm thinking this is like a very formulaic like indie movie is like the idea of exposing and breaking the fantasy on every front. Like they did it everywhere else, and so they had to do it in the relationship. Like that relationship could not go through and like be absolutely perfect.
Yeah,
because it needed to follow that sort of like formula. I think.
It just sort of fell away. They didn't do anything with it.
But here's the thing: is that if the film was less provocative and less interested in doing innovative things, or like pretty unique ideas, like in the world of surrealism or magical realism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If a film was any less of that, then I would be really much more. Annoyed by the lack of that relationship development, but because the film kind of like it doesn't just abandon that story, it abandons that story for a pretty amazing one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, and that's that thing about I like the sort of punk rock kind of first time filmmaker.
Sure.
All of his eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Like that's actually a thing I really love about watching first time filmmakers. Sometimes is like the sense that I feel like. It's kind of my philosophy on filmmaking, although I don't necessarily follow it every time. But like, I kind of feel like every time I make something, it should be as though I'm never going to make anything again. And like, I've got to throw everything I've got at this as though this might be the last thing I make.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that's something that's true of this film, which is that it's almost unrestrained. And but the amazing thing is I've seen unrestrained films before that go way off the rails and completely derail. This never gets quite derailed. Mm-hmm. This stays for the most part on an interesting track. Again, maybe if he had another round at this or something like that, it would become even more pointed. But maybe it'd be less interesting as well. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to either I keep using shotgun or tree branches, but like I do think it was here's the script going and here's 6 possibilities. It's actually, God, I can't believe I'm going to use this analogy. It's actually very quantum physics-ish. And by that I mean, light is both a particle and a wave, and technically, if you're, I gotta simplify this real quick or I'm going to go down a real rabbit hole, but like, it's a wave of possibility, and you don't really realize where light will hit. Like if you're doing a double slit experiment or etc., you can't. You will never know where the light particle goes, or it won't justify until something perceives it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I just was reading about this. It's the idea that it's participatory.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But that also, if light is that way, then you have to think of actually most all matter is probably that. So most everything is not just a simple thing, but a wave of possibilities depending on what you're talking about. Anyway, the point being, this film really feels like that because it feels like the film itself does a bunch of stuff that notices a thing and it's like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then it does a bunch more stuff in that direction that it notices a thing and it might be a different direction. So that's very interesting and something I hadn't seen done to this level before. And by this level, I mean, if you looked at this, like if you took away the style and the sort of meaning behind this thing and you just looked at it from a structure perspective, you'd be like, ugh.
Yeah.
But because those two things are huge in what the movie wants to focus on, both style and meaning, you don't care. Like, you don't really care that these things don't justify. You don't really care that it's not wrapped up in a nice little neat bow. And that's something that to get me not to actually care about that stuff is, I find that incredibly impressive, and that's a skill that most films that do this don't work for me. So yeah.
I thought what was interesting is going back to the idea of like the how they every single time there was like a fantasy or like a good moment, they would break it. Like have you seen? Of course you have, but Austin Powers.
Yeah.
Like whenever, whenever the bad guys get the money.
Yeah.
They do this thing. It's like any other movie. Whenever they get what they wanted, the scene would have ended.
Yeah.
But it exposes like what it's like 5 minutes later once you get the fantasy, and they start doing that thing where they're like laughing and then they're coughing and then it's just like very awkward and they're looking at each other. This like. It's okay. So it's like what the rule of art is that it takes something uncomfortable to watch and makes it bearable. Like if it's doing its job, it takes something that like what we were talking about in the beginning that kind of like confronts you with something to think about for yourself, but then it takes it and there's relief. And in this, it's comedy. So and it's like every single time. It broke the fantasy every single time. And I think like the very first one was whenever he's in the interview and he's going through like his list and you're like, oh, this guy's got it together. He's got his trophy. And then it's just like, but you never did that job because I was there and that trophy's bunk. And then you're just like, oh, and then but then it has like kind of like a funny little moment.
Which is like,
Fowler.
yeah.
And then it goes to in the bedroom, like he's got his girl, like they're about to get it on. And then the garage door like goes up and that's like this humiliating thing. And but then they have comedy to cover it up. And it's just like every time there's like an uncomfortable moment like that, the comedy I felt like was well placed in that they gave it some relief. It's like every time I just got like a little like, ooh, like there was something funny there to like kind of like as a release valve.
So let's talk a little bit about the issues that this film kind of has on its mind, you know, so we can get a little specific about it. I mean, obviously the correlation between modern capitalism and slavery is something very foregrounded in this movie. It's very much at the heart of what this film is, which is to say that modern employment dehumanizes people to the point of slavery, and even to the point of where human lives are no longer as valuable as your body is if it can be transformed into a horse. You know, like and that's the kind of the point that gets it, that I think is most foregrounded in this movie. I mean, how did you guys feel about the way in which this film treated messaging? You know, like the way the certain issues that it really did have at the heart of what it was trying to say.
I think something it did that I found was doubly refreshing, like double mint gum, would be that it.
This episode is brought by Double Mint Gum.
Shahir just swallowed it. It's so good.
7 years.
The weird thing is, so let's take this. So obviously the battle is against sort of like, you know, employment as slavery, and also another thing is sort of like the betterment of yourself at the expense of others. And the interesting part I liked about it is no one in the film is actually innocent away from this. It's all just different levels or shades of it. For instance, the good guys are all posed as the people trying to unionize to fight back against the telemarketer company, right? That's screwing them out of wages and all that jazz, which is true. It's all true. But you can actually take it back a level. And what is their job? Their job is to swindle people out of their money, selling them junk they don't need.
Yeah.
So it's still the same thing that even Cassius is going through, just on like 3 steps down. And you have to justify in yourself what level of of advantage taking of others are you comfortable with to live your life?
Yeah.
And this whole movie is like tiers of that. No one is innocent.
Right.
Yeah.
And no one is truly altruistic in this movie. In fact, the hero only becomes a hero after really abusing a ton of power, and then sort of like it's very interesting that like there's no moral correctness here. There's just variations.
That's also classic. So classic like pop mainstream movies, like it's morally very
Black and
black
white.
and white.
Yeah.
And then indie movies are more like ambiguous. It's just like it's nothing about it's abstract. And in a popular movie, like the good guy kills the bad guy and then everything's okay. And then it's like this. It's just like there was a moment when he's on the phone with I think it was like the second woman that he called.
Yeah, whose husband had just died.
Yeah, and you see him like
sticking to the script.
yeah.
Yep.
And like but you like feel that too, where it's just like he's got as it goes back to like that idiot thing, like he just like keeps like going against the thing that he knows to do, but he doesn't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the ideas that this film has, which is that the idea of sticking to the script is a form of dehumanization because it removes autonomy.
Yeah.
And I think my experience of broadly speaking capitalism, but like more specifically interacting with bureaucracy, is that notion that people lose their autonomy, lose their empathy in the face of obvious responses. Like if you're in that call and someone's husband has died, you any human being is like, no, okay, this is not the time to have that conversation. I'm sorry. Sorry to have bothered you. Please go about your day. But a removal of autonomy, the sticking to the script, creating an algorithm, creating us into worker horses, dehumanizes us even further. And I think that's, that's my experience of like, when you go to the DMV, for example, and you're like, there's a clear solution to this problem that if you just thought about outside of your rule book would make sense. But because you have a rule book, and I think that's something anyone who's worked in either modern bureaucracy or any company where you're, where you have like a methodology for approaching problems that is governed by a script or a guidebook or a manual or something like that, where you're not essentially being creative, has had to experience. I don't know if you got like that's something that I kind of feel very strongly about.
It's the creativity is what makes you human. Like that's what like separates us from like other species, is like we are the only ones capable of the ability to not be like what we are,
and also to be empathetic and have a moral imagination that extends to the person we're dealing with. Right?
I think that's really interesting, because it's the lack of creativity that causes the inhumanity.
But we live in a society that ultimately moves forward off the back of autonomy, but back of the lack of autonomy. Like we all sit here with devices that were created on a factory line that require like almost machine-like processing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a certain percentage of our lives that's pushed forward by the machine.
What level of comfort in your own life are you willing to take, and in order to make you're taking something, and that means that someone else had to give it.
Had to give something.
There's literally what is that, a Heinlein thing? There's no such thing as a free lunch. Like that's sort of this thing where there's no such thing as like you can't be gifted a thing really ever, because that gift did take work from another thing that is nowhere near connected to you. Like there's always a cost of things that you get.
Yeah.
What if just as a sort of contrarian view, Steve Lift, played by Armie Hammer in this film, is
such a delight.
He plays an entrepreneur who runs the worry-free cult, whatever, and has this plan for equine labor, equisapien labor.
Yeah.
What if the proposition that he has was could that be an interesting proposition that he offers? Cassius, which is, I will pay you this much money for 5 years of your life, and then once that 5 years is up, you don't ever have to do this again.
Yeah.
Like, would that be an alternative model? Because right now, what we have is kind of you will just continually be paying for the rest of your life, to live this life. But what if you could pay it all up front in 5 years, of misery, but that's it.
You're talking high class indentured servitude.
Yeah, indentured servitude for
but like posh.
Yeah, like enough to never have to work again. Like what if that was the alternative model? And I don't think the film explores it. I'm just positing that hypothetically.
What if we would do it?
Yeah.
Jess?
Would you
No.
would you become a horse?
No. No.
For 5 if
I
you
would- Here's the thing. Armie Hammer was an idiot too.
Right, how's
Like,
that?
because he's very comedic and that he's like insane and like doesn't and like keeps like saying and doing obscene, and it's funny because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he doesn't know he's an idiot.
It's funny because he plays it straight. Like
Yeah.
everything is like, just watch the video. Just watch the video.
Yeah,
It all
yeah.
makes sense. Just watch the
And
video.
then he hands him, doesn't it have like a smiley face on it or something whenever he has like
Oh,
the amount
the
written
$100
down?
million has a smiley face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he almost has a moment where he breaks it too, where he like he does this thing whenever Cash like that when he has his like kind of like epiphany
Yeah.
of like this is crazy.
Yeah.
Where you see Armie Hammer's character, he goes, what? It's like it's not. I'm not crazy, am I? And he has this little bit of a moment, and then he like dips into a tragic character because you're like, oh, he like kind of knows he's like messed up. But I like didn't buy anything he was saying. I was like, he's just like, because he's also an idiot, he's just saying whatever he can and like made up this fake number to like get him to do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee that your 5 years would actually be 5 years.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
buy that for like a second.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
No way. No way.
It's funny. There was
Because he also did trick him, right? Like he
Yeah.
was like, I wouldn't give you. Didn't he say something like, I wouldn't give you the formula unless I told you, bruh?
Yeah.
And then like, oh
Yeah.
no, he actually did.
And then he
Yeah.
actually did.
Yeah.
Which again led me to believe that maybe it was part of the plan the whole time. But there's an interesting thing. It was actually, I think, a tweet from someone today that basically was like, it was talking about the current thing about Elon Musk and how he was an idiot on Twitter and now has apologized and all that jazz. And someone's like, what? You mean to tell me that the out of touch billionaire who actually believes we're all living in a simulation isn't going to be empathetic to the thoughts and feelings of others?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like once you become so detached, there is a bit of you that becomes to a thing where it's like, just watch the video. Look, this all makes sense. Just watch the video.
But obviously, none of that matters because we did elect a billionaire president who's clearly in touch with all of us, right? Like he's in touch with.
Well, he's in touch with some people across the ocean.
Yeah, there you go.
This movie hits a lot of different notes, and I guess I'll kind of get into my final thought here. I guess the bottom line is, I said it before and I'll say it again. I think that it's better for a film to try a bunch of interesting stuff and then be able to keep your attention despite a couple, I would call it filmmaking faux pas. I wouldn't even call it like mistakes. I think it's what this movie's supposed to be and therefore it can't be a mistake. It's just, you're going to experience it a little bit different. And I think it deals with a ton of more issues than most any film actually has in recent memory. And it was refreshing, and honestly, it's Scott Pilgrim to the next level. I love the style of Scott Pilgrim, but Scott Pilgrim is saying one specific thing.
Yeah.
This movie, it basically, A, it's saying a lot of different things, and B, the things it is saying is far more important and pressing in our world. So despite the fact that I wasn't quite on board with the turn. Although, side note, the last thing I'll say is, what if, because the weird stuff only starts happening once he becomes the meme, once the soda can hits him in the head and he has the bloody thing on his head. What if most of that shit is kind of all in his head?
I thought that too. I went through that was like the reframing thing.
Yeah.
Where it was like whenever the movie, as soon as like the deaths start dropping into the ground whenever he's doing telemarketing, White Voice was a reframing. That was a reframing because it's like, is he just like
Going nuts? Does he have a concussion?
Yeah.
And I think that might have been a branching path that once the filmmakers perceived it, it did not actually occur, but that was something there that could have. So anyway, it's a web of quantum entangled possibilities, and I think you should go see it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Shahir?
I think I sort of prefaced this up front, which is that the film, for me personally, required like a slight paradigm shift, which is I think the thing you're talking about, which is, obviously the things that I look for in a film as sort of singular narrative experiences that where all narrative pathways lead down one path, and this is not that. This is a multi-dimensional, multifaceted experience, and that in itself is interesting, refreshing. I do have, like as far as an experience goes, there are issues with it. There are problems with it. There are things I can't say that, the humor necessarily worked for me. I can't say that the satire was on point and as effective as I kind of wanted it to be. Like I don't think that the sort of condemnation of corporate culture goes much beyond things you would have seen before in films like Office Space, for example, or Fight Club or whatever. But I think there is a sort of jolt of energy to this film, and a sort of a worldview that this film offers, which is so unique, which is so unusual to have in the movie theaters at this time and place, that it is entirely, in a way, required viewing, regardless of the experience not being necessarily one that I would, classify as like the great movies or anything like that. But it is one that I thoroughly enjoyed, and one that I thoroughly kind of, for me, the moment was once it leaned into the weirdness of it, just really going for the oddities, the going for the horse cock is kind of where I was really into this movie. But that still makes it a wonderful experience, and probably one in my mind will get stronger with repeat viewing.
Yeah.
Because one where I'm kind of my expectations are set up slightly differently.
Yeah. I guess if I rewatched it, I would rewatch it completely differently now that I know how it ends. But yeah, this movie is a prism, and so it's very hard to articulate because it's so there's just so much going on. But yeah, I think too, movies have a responsibility to sort of reflect a messaging that is relevant and resonates with what's going on in the culture right now, and it does that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's a good piece of art. I think I respected. I thought it was entertaining, and I respected what it was doing as art. But yeah, that I had a very visceral reaction to the horse, almost like a horror movie reaction. Yeah. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And it was just it got so messed up where I was just what is this?
And
what is this movie?
The Equisapiens had a real 90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles costume character vibe to them, and I was like, ugh, but wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very slimy. And so I don't know. I don't know if it's my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's that kind of stuff, especially having a visceral reaction to something like that, that kind of sticks with me for a while, and it makes me, I'll be thinking about it for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think you should go see it because I think it's very entertaining, and I think it's very relevant, and it's smart and different, and yeah, it's nice to see something that isn't going back to the well of the same thing that we've seen over, because you get kind of tired going to the movie after a while if you just know you're going to get the same repeat sort of patterns. But yeah, this was very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, this has been the only podcast about the film Sorry to Bother You. Jessica Tucker, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
And don't make it so long next time.
I know. You got to keep your crown now.
Just fly back on our expense account whenever you want. I'll give you the credit card number. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Just put it on your card.
Put it on your card.
We'll reimburse you.
There'll be totally reimbursement. Do you accept snacks?
Of course.
Okay, great. When you are not either jet setting from coast to coast or blessing us or Steve Harvey with your presence, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram at jessica.a.tucker.
Oh wait, has that changed?
I changed it.
That changed. Oh, why?
It's very long now.
Well, why did you change it? I like that. Was it Mother
Tucker?
Oh my God! So my Twitter handle was Mother Tucker, and I had that. I made it a long time ago, and then I don't really use my Twitter, and then
your Twitter's now Jessica Tuckera.
Yeah, because Jessica Tucker was taken, and my middle initial is A.
So wait, you're saying Mother Tucker is up for grabs?
Mother Tucker, yeah, Mother MOTHATUCKA.
I'm gonna lock that down.
Get on that. All right. Well, go check out all of Jess's Instagrams and life and works there. Shahir, when you're not stealing Jess's old Twitter handle.
Oh man, there's the Jess Tucker parody account.
Oh no,
is at Mother Tucker right now. You can.
Where can folks find you?
You can find me controlling that account from my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. I don't think anyone's going to take a run at Shahir Daud. No one's going to steal my Twitter handle. Nobody's that interested.
You know what I really miss that you didn't do is dub.
Dub, dub, dub. Oh, did I used to do that?
did used to do that.
dub.
Yeah.
Dub. That's like I'm a radio host from the 90s.
Yeah.
Matt Kroll, where can people? I'm not going to go with anything now. I'm all flushed from not being saying dub 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 and angry at myself. Matt, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me being introduced by someone where all the blood didn't rush away from their brain straight to a horse cock at MatthewKroll.com. That's MatthewKroll.com for my life and works. Also, you can find me at Skeletor, the number 4 PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, as the voice and showrunner of Extra Credits on YouTube, search that up. We just did a video on the concept of ma, which is Japanese, the theory, which you can't even put
Silence,
it really.
right?
It's not really silence. It's the combination of emptiness or silence along with art that gives you the emotional flavor, basically, of what the actual piece is supposed to do. It's hard to actually, even when we did the video, it's really hard to define it in English.
Right.
But it's one of my favorite videos we've ever done. Big shout out to Scott DeWitt, who did the art. It's phenomenal. So check that out. And yeah, so Jess, don't make it so long till the next time you come here.
Okay.
And
Done.
and great, that was easy. What else can I ask for? Shahir, give me $5.
I'll give you $5 if you write into us with your thoughts and opinions on Sorry to Bother You at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can also send us a PayPal link to pay us the $5.
Done.
Oh, wait, are they paying us or are we paying them?
I thought I was paying you to write a. Wait, I got confused.
You're paying me to write a review? No.
No, people are writing reviews, and then
then they're paying
No
us.
one's getting paid. Just talk to us. Let us know
This
what
is
you
how
think.
capitalism works. Onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. Yeah, until next week, where we might be taking up a mission that may be possible.
Maybe possible, might not be. I mean, we don't know.
At this stage, are any of these missions impossible? Come on.
I mean, they're really kind of. They're
Until Tom Cruise passes away in one of these movies, every mission was possible.
It's
all
mission
possible.
mission improbable.
Yeah, mission slightly improbable.
So just a little bit. All right. Well, we will see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Hey.